Yeah, I would submit to everyone here that human rights is the very glue that holds all of this together. But it's an adhesive that is weakening. And we are at a critical time now, seeing a world which is filled with contradictions. Some of you may be studying logic, and I remember studying this discipline back in the 14th century when I was where you are now. And it's premised on the fundamental principle and law of contradiction, that you have mutually exclusive conditions from which you then make deductions. I would submit to you today that we don't really have that. We have a world where we see progress along so many vectors. We see progress when it comes to LGBTI rights. We see progress when it comes to the rights of women, the rights of children, the acceptance that rights are universal in many respects, or in all parts of the world. But we also likewise see huge pressures on human rights defenders, the human rights agenda, and it's perhaps a testimony to the strength of it that we now see these very strong reactions against. So while you see all these summits taking place and you see meetings at high levels, you have the impression that the world is somehow coming closer, that the centripetal forces are very strong. When in actual fact, what we also see happening is these centrifugal forces tearing away at what it is that we constructed at the end of the Second World War. We see raging throughout Europe xenophobia and racism, bigotry, language we had thought had been excised from our lexicon coming back, and with almost just a shrug from the rest of the world. We see in many parts of the world the return to authoritarianism of the most brutal kind. We see people who, for expressing the mildest dissent, are put in prison. But we're also inspired, and we're inspired by the youth. And how, let me explain this to you. If someone said to you, at the formative stage of your life, when you have reached this stage, you've reached university, if someone said to you, for speaking out, you will potentially lose your career, you will even lose perhaps access to your family and friends. You could be imprisoned for 15, 20 years. Would you take the risk? And you would think that on careful reflection, most people would decline, because so few people seemingly stand out and are brave enough to speak. But the more you look at societies around the world, and particularly young people, you're constantly amazed how people will stand up and speak. I was in the Eastern Congo not long ago, and there's this youth group, the Lucha, young people who just get out there and speak, and they're put in prison, and then we submit lists to the government and ask them to be released, and they're released, and then they speak again, and then they're back in prison again. And it's phenomenal. And so you realize the potential of youth, the bravery of youth. But it does require all of us to act as a wave function, not as sort of particles, each of us speaking on our own, but as a movement that rejects basically this assault on human rights, which then has an impact when it comes to humanitarian consequences, the world that we live in, peace and security, conflicts, and ultimately, for those who violate and vitiate the rights of others, there has to be justice for the victims, of course, and justice for the perpetrator. And so human rights is the very glue that connects all of this together, and it's a glue that's fragile, and it needs the support of every single person in this room. Thank you.